We are so lucky to have as this pre-recorded segment for our session, a chance to talk with one of our best autism-friendly performances consultants, Harry Smolin. Welcome, Harry.
Thank you, Lisa. I'm happy to be here.
Harry, you love theater.
Yep.
So let's just jump right in here and you tell us about your first Broadway show experiences.
I've loved theater all my life and wanted to work in the theater industry for as long as I can remember. I started to go to Broadway shows when I was 8 years old, as soon as my parents felt comfortable that I could sit through an entire show. Since early childhood, I've loved animation, so we started with a show that began its life as an animated movie so I'd be familiar with the storyline and the characters. By the time I started working for TDF in 2013, I'd already seen 32 Broadway shows over a period of 8 years. But that's not to say it was always easy for me.
Can you tell us about some of the challenges you faced when you were going to Broadway shows early on?
As many people with autism do, I have food sensitivities. There would rarely be anything at a concession stand that I could eat. I used to bring grapes to the theater with me as a comfort food. They filled a need if I got hungry and helped relieve any anxiety I might have. At one of the first shows I saw, the grapes were taken away by the people inspecting bags at the entrance. Even after we explained why I needed them, they still weren't allowed. I also have hypersensitive hearing, another common autistic trait. At another show, I was reprimanded for trying to grab a ticket scanner. I was fascinated by the sound they make. I also had the experience of sitting so close to a speaker that the sound was painful, and under an air conditioning vent that was so brisk it made my hair move, and that was the loudest sound I could hear throughout the show. In fact, working with a therapist on managing sound is how I came to TDF. She was the link.
I remember that.
Yeah.
You have many tasks that you do for us at TDF, but they usually start with your previewing a show.
Yep.
Can you tell us a little bit about that process?
Previewing a show is one of the most important things I do for TDF. It happens at the start of the planning process and is how potential problems are identified. When previewing a show, I pay attention to all the things I mentioned previously, including the location of vents and speakers, but also to some other things that might be issues for me, such as stage fog and character action in the aisles. One example of an issue I have is with bass sounds, such as thunder, which cause vibration that I can feel in my seat. In addition to paying attention to things that are issues for me, I also pay attention to things that might be issues for someone else with autism. For example, at one show I saw, women wore skirts that extended out over the edge of the stage, close enough to the audience that someone sitting in the front row could try to grab them. I would never try to grab at an actor's costume, but there might be another person who would be attracted to the movement of the fabric. Action in the aisles can be exciting for one person and terrifying for another. It can be difficult to read facial expressions, which can make masked characters especially terrifying.
After we have your preview report, typically you then meet with the cast, the house staff, the production crew, the volunteers. Can you tell us what you talk to them about? What is that like?
One of the things I'm proudest of about this job is that I'm able to put a friendly face on autism. A few days before an autism-friendly performance, I meet with the cast, crew, and house staff of a show to discuss my experience of seeing the show as a person with autism. When people meet me, they see that I love theater, and despite its challenges, I'm enthusiastic about the experience of seeing a show. Sometimes people have questions for me, and sometimes they'll share an experience with someone they know who has autism.
Does anything stand out to you? Any special experiences you've had over the years working on shows?
Every show is a different experience, but there are several that have stood out to me. At one show, I met an usher who was very helpful to me, and at subsequent performances I attended at that theater, she remembered me, and we still greet each other whenever we see each other, even years later. I've met several stage managers who, after listening to me speak about my experiences, were very helpful in addressing my challenges with shows, even demonstrating a stage fog machine for me. There was one experience I remember where I was able to identify what the problem an audience member was having. I was working as a volunteer on show day when I met a little boy with his dad who was upset. He was afraid that a character on stage would come out into the audience and hurt him. I used to be afraid of the same thing when I was his age. It made sense to me that a character who was evil on stage would be the same way in the audience. That very literal interpretation is common to autism. Even to this day, I'm not completely comfortable with action in the aisles, but on that day, I was able to help that little boy.
That was an important experience for you. I remember that. Are there any other important moments that you've had while you've been working on shows with us? Anything meaningful? Anything?
Well, I think the most meaningful thing is, and the most important thing is that when I started to go to theater as a little boy, there were no accommodations to help people like me.
Right.
It's important to remember that, and it's remarkable that TDF's been able to make the changes it has.
Mm-hmm.
As I mentioned before, I had the experience of sitting too close to a speaker at one show,
Right.
and based on that experience, TDF now shows the location of speakers on seating charts when selling tickets. TDF also allows people to bring comfort items to autism-friendly performances, whether it's a toy, a pillow, food, or another item. This was based on the experience of having my breaks taken away. And it meant a lot to me in my early years to see my favorite animated characters come to life on the stage, but I was confused when they didn't look like the animated characters. TDF's character guides were created in response to this and show a picture of the animated and stage characters side by side to make the transition easier. All of these can help make the experience more comfortable, and I'm very proud to have helped make these changes happen.
Is there anything in the process that has changed over the years?
In some ways, the process hasn't changed at all, because we meet people and work with new shows that have never done an autism-friendly performance and are learning the process for the first time. Everything is new to them, even though it isn't new to us. We also work with shows that have done an autism-friendly performance once a year for years now. The people change, but the process doesn't. But that said, we always look for more accommodations we can introduce and more ways we can help people. Every show is different and presents a different set of challenges. At the most recent show I previewed, for example, there were more strobe lights than any show I've ever attended. That's a challenge. For me personally, when I look back to when I started to go to theater, there were no accommodations to help people like me, and now there are many. Some of the things I couldn't understand or were too much sensory overload for me as a child aren't issues for me now, but I've become more aware of other things. It's a constantly evolving process as I age and gain more experiences.
How important was it for us to get back to in-person autism-friendly performances after the COVID shutdown?
I think it was critically important. Repetition is key for an audience with autism. The more a person with autism experiences things, the more opportunities they have to practice coping strategies. The void left by not being able to come back to live theater in person was huge. When we came back to our first show, we saw evidence of this. I specifically remember one young person who had been at many autism-friendly performances before, who was having trouble even getting in the door without being upset. I asked a therapist I work with to teach me more about this process, because I was concerned that my own hypersensitive hearing would be heightened from being away from theater for so long. But that wasn't the case. She explained that tasks that have to be practiced, such as sitting still, might be difficult, but we felt confident that coming back to the supportive environment these shows provide would make reacclimating easier for everyone.
Harry, that about wraps up our time together. It's been such a pleasure talking with you. Thank you so much.
You're
Harry.
welcome. It's been a pleasure for me too.